Is now the right time to buy a home? I mean, interest rates are up, prices are up. Should I buy a home now or should I wait? Well, we're going to talk about that in today's topic, and we're going to get started right now. Hi, my name is David Matney with Nebraska Realty. I'm a local realtor here in Omaha, Nebraska. Now let's jump into today's topic. I meet with buyers and sellers every day, and everyone is aware that we're in a different market. Many buyers are afraid that the market is overheated, and they're afraid of prices coming down, and they're afraid of buying in today's market because, hey, we don't know what the future is going to be, and what if it's like 2008 and prices come down? Well, 2008 and today are two entirely different things. However, some of the things that happened in 2008 are affecting today's market. Now, I was an agent back in 2008, and the market then was entirely different. Now, back then, if you fogged a mirror, you could buy a home. And then the other thing that went on was we had built a large number of homes. And in the past decade, going over the last 12 years, going back, we have built far fewer homes. So some of today's challenges are a result of the recession of 2008. Now, when someone dies, gets married, or has a child, it creates a real estate need, and people have to live somewhere. Now, buying a home is a big decision. Now, keep in mind, it is an individual decision. Also, keep this in mind. You can buy the right home in a great market. You can buy a great home in a terrible market. You can also buy the right home in the right market at the wrong time. When you buy a home when it is the right time for you and your family. It is a long-term purchase, and you want to buy a home when you are ready. Now, some folks have to rent because they may need time to get their financial house in order. Now, if that's the case, don't be ashamed or feel embarrassed or anything if it's not the right time for you yet. Now, if you look long-term in terms of home prices over time, buying a home allows you to build equity. For example, 30 years from now, do you think rents will be higher today or 30 years from now? When I first purchased my very first investment property, it was back in the early 1990s. And guess what? I was scared, and I had reason to be. The day after closing, Iraq invaded Kuwait. So there was a lot of uncertainty in the world. And get this, my interest rate was 13.5%. I had to come up with 20% down, and I was 21 years old at the time, and I was still going to school, and I didn't even know what I didn't know. There's always going to be some uncertainty in the world. All right, now looking back, the mistake I made was not buying more property. Not every deal is going to work out. Okay, I've made some mistakes and I've made some doozies, and I've learned from those mistakes. Now, I share those mistakes so my clients don't make the same mistake that I made. Now, when I made that very first investment property and I was in college going to school, the purchase price, now this is going to date me, but it was $10,000. But for me at the time, boy, that was a big chunk of money. Now my payment, get this, was $135 a month. Now my rent was $400, so it cash flowed. Okay, now the numbers made sense to me at the time. Now the purchase itself has to make sense. There's going to be some unknowns, and you're taking a calculated risk. And not everyone will have the same assessment. For example, when I purchased that property, I bought it on my own. But my dad, when he looked at it, he was a little more skeptical. Now, looking back at it as a 50-year-old guy, I'm looking back at it and I have the same thought process. But at the time, the home was built in 1890. It cash flowed well. It was a very low price, but all the systems in it were old. It had an older furnace and it had an old roof on it. And at the time, I didn't quite see the amount of maintenance that was going to be involved. It still worked out for me okay, but would I buy that very same property today? Well, of course, for $10,000, I sure would, but that home would not be $10,000. But here's what I'm trying to say, and that is you want to buy the home that makes sense for your situation. For my situation at the time, looking at it, I thought it was worth the risk. Now, when you purchase a home, you want to look at the numbers. Does the payment make sense? Can you afford the home? Do you have funds in reserve set aside for maintenance? Now, when you rent, you're paying someone else to get rich. Your interest rate when you rent is 100%. Landlords are landlords for only one reason, and that is to make money. You're helping someone else achieve their real estate dreams when you're renting. And here's another word of caution. Okay, there are no shortcuts. Okay, now there's companies out there, and Wall Street's getting into the game now. There's companies out there that are doing rent to own programs. Okay, now there is no free lunch. These are really, really smart people, and these are billion-dollar companies. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, I know you can't buy a home right now. Here's what we'll do. We'll buy the home for you, and then you can rent from us and then purchase it later on down the road. And for every gimme, there's a gotcha. You want to be very careful about getting into any kind of deal like this, because guess what? Those firms are going to make money off you one way or another. And a lot of times what'll happen is people won't even remotely bother reading the contract. And those contracts, when you're doing those rent-to-own programs, are written by the attorneys that are paid for by these giant Wall Street companies. You know, let's say you're in a situation where you can't buy yet. That just means right at the current time. You can get yourself squared away and then buy later on down the road. But there are no shortcuts to this. You want to buy a home when you're ready. Now, will you ever be ready? No, there's never going to be a perfect home, and there's never going to be a perfect time. Okay. And there's always going to be some unknown factor out there. Here's the other thing too. Buying a home today is going to be more difficult. And it's going to have to be something that you have to start planning for way in the future. Now, I really feel for the young folks out there that are trying to buy their first home. And here's the other thing too. A lot of times when you're in your early 20s, you don't think about the future. I think going forward, if you're that young person, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to build the habit of saving money, and you're going to have to maybe dial back on that extravagant wedding and maybe have a little bit more affordable wedding and save some of that money towards your home purchase. And then same thing goes with going to school. Like, let's say you want to go to school out of state. You might be better off going to a school in state and then maybe still living at home while you're going to school in order to, you know, still work and then put some of that money aside so you can buy a home down the future. Now, I get it. Everybody wants to have a good time in college and go away and party and all that. It may be just something that you have to think a little bit longer term, because what I'm afraid of is if you get way in debt with student debt, it's just going to be harder and harder and harder for you to purchase that first home. And buying a home is a way of building long-term generational wealth. In today's world, you know, the consumer has more resources to get more knowledgeable about it. Back in the day, you know, you had to rely on friends and family, and you hope they were knowledgeable. And then real estate is one of those things that people think they have a much deeper knowledge than they actually have. You know, getting advice from friends and family and that sort of thing. They might have your best interest in heart, but if they're not that knowledgeable about it, you might be getting terrible advice. Looking back, knowing what I know now, would I have bought that very same property? Probably not, just because of all the maintenance factors. And it's called experience. Now, there's a quote that goes like this: good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. One way you can leverage your lack of experience is by learning from other people. Perfect home does not exist either, but if you're ready to buy, then go ahead and buy. Okay, if the deal makes sense and it's something that you feel comfortable moving forward with, and you've done some sort of due diligence and you've surrounded yourself with good advisors, then go ahead and move forward. Speaking of moving forward, why don't we move forward and subscribe to the channel? And hey, don't forget to watch this video next, and you make it a great day.